Right now, Ukraine's superweapon is turning the Kremlin's life into a nightmare. The conveyor belt of retribution cannot be stopped. Ukrainian engineers are attacking with innovation. Even the American HIMARS has given up its place on the pedestal of Ukrainian military power. This is only the beginning. Shock on the streets of Russia, blood mass raids, and chaos. Russians are hunting non-Russians. The horrific slaughter has shocked the entire world. Details coming soon. Watch until the end. Sensation: Fedorov has sparked a new revolution in the Ukrainian Army. Starlink was only the beginning. Russia is doomed. Air defense F-16S HIMARS. The Ukrainian armed forces are changing before our eyes. The Ukrainian Minister of Defense is shocking the allies. Urgent: Transnistria and Belarus are being liberated from Russia. A secret operation by the Ukrainian armed forces has stunned everyone. Sapsan is blowing up the Russian Federation. Ukrainian superweapons are shocking the world. A new development by domestic engineers surpasses Western counterparts 1,000-fold. The Kremlin is in a panic. The missile is already on the assembly line. Now, peaceful sleep for Kremlin officials has come to an end. NATO is coming apart at the seams, and Kyiv is receiving the key to the security of an entire continent. The game for control over Europe's future has begun. Ukraine is in charge. A new alliance is shaking up the established order. Kyiv is growing stronger than ever before. Europeans are preparing a new format for cooperation. All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. A sensation, an incredible development by Ukrainian engineers has amazed everyone. Even HIMARS pales in comparison. While diplomats are bogged down in negotiations, Ukrainian factories are roaring at full capacity. New innovations are turning life for the Kremlin's residents into a real nightmare. The conveyor belt of retribution doesn't stop for a second. And this is just the beginning. Power decides everything. We'll tell you what else is happening today in Ukraine's defense industry in our report. Mass production of strike and reconnaissance drones, naval unmanned vehicles, artillery, and missiles. All of this has transformed Ukraine from an arms importer into a full-fledged producer of modern weaponry.
Ukraine is launching serial production of its first ballistic missile.
Ukraine is developing a universal missile system based on the HIMARS principle.
Ukraine has launched serial production of Octopus interceptor drones.
A Ukrainian company has developed ground-based robotic systems equipped with electronic warfare modules.
Ukraine's defense industry has made a leap that just a few years ago seemed impossible.
Since 2022, Ukraine has demonstrated such a high level of creativity and inventiveness that none of our partner countries had expected from us before. We have shown just how inventive and creative we can be. When it comes to dominance at sea, we don't have our own fleet or flotilla, but we ensure complete control of the Black Sea thanks to maritime drones.
Today, long-range capability has become a priority, along with drones of various types, bases, and the defense industry. This is exactly what Ukraine is betting on.
110 billion for drones. Ukraine has tripled its production.
It is precisely through drones that Ukraine compensates for the shortage of missiles and achieves parity with Russia in the air.
In fact, for now, drones are the dominant means of striking targets, even when it comes to long-range capabilities. That is, long-range drones, long-distance drones, they remain dominant, and comparing them to missiles or any other means of attack is not entirely fair or accurate at this point. As soon as we reach mass and serial production of missile weaponry, of course, the situation will change.
And this is a key change in the war. Russia no longer has a technological monopoly, not even in the air. And again, we shouldn't forget about the sea, which Ukraine can control even without a fleet. And it's all thanks to maritime unmanned systems.
The use of Magura has inflicted over $500 million in losses on the Russian fleet, in losses according to Ukrainian intelligence estimates. Together with other platforms, particularly Sea Baby, this has systematically complicated the enemy's presence and basing in the Black Sea. On December 20th, 2025, Ukraine and Portugal signed a joint statement on partnership in the production of maritime drones. And
this is another significant change. Today, partners are not just supplying weapons, but are entering into joint production.
Ukraine and Portugal have agreed on joint production of maritime drones.
The largest defense company in the Czech Republic is launching ammunition production in Ukraine.
Ukraine and Britain will launch production of interceptor drones to counter Shaheds.
But let's get back to long-range capabilities. Drones are not the only argument in this matter. A separate area is the missile program. We're talking, of course, about the well-known Neptune, which, after modernization, transformed from an anti-ship system that sank the cruiser Moskva into a long-range missile for striking ground targets.
I think this was one of those presentations we've been waiting for so long. the long-range Neptune. After all, this is a more high-tech missile used with precision, almost surgically.
But Ukraine's missile arsenal is much broader, and as the president of Ukraine said, as of December 2025, it is being actively used.
To be frank, Ukraine is already using cruise missiles today. Neptunes, long-range Neptunes, Polyanitsia, Flamingo, as well as Sapsan. To be honest, we've started.
This is Ukraine's long arm. There is little talk about such systems, but their presence changes the enemy's calculations. Less publicity, more results. There are also results in the production of mortar and artillery munitions. But it's not just about ammunition.
Today, Ukraine produces more 2 S-22 Bodana self-propelled artillery systems per year than the French company Nexter, which manufactures the Caesar self-propelled howitzer. These are among the first wheeled self-propelled artillery systems that we received from our... And in order to successfully bring everything to a complete and safe stop, you must ensure that you follow every single one of these specific procedural steps very carefully to avoid any potential issues or complications during the shutdown process.
Or even slow down is not something the Ukrainian defense industry intends to do. That's why Ukraine, together with its partners, will continue to develop defense projects.
Ukraine and Poland will jointly modernize the MiG-29, which will be provided by the Polish side, a range of drones, air defense, and aviation. Ukraine is deepening its defense cooperation with the Netherlands. France has announced the deepening of its cooperation with Ukraine in the field of drones.
In addition, Ukraine's Minister of Defense Mikhailo Fedorov is announcing new developments. For example, a Ukrainian counterpart to reconnaissance drones like the DJI Mavic and the Russian Molniya. And of course, as part of strengthening its defense capabilities, the Ministry of Defense continues to digitize the front and is implementing a new drone management system. These are not isolated experiments, but systematic work by the defense industry. During the full-scale war, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex has learned the most important thing: to respond quickly to challenges on the battlefield.
Every year, Ukraine surprises with new inventions and innovations. Then, in a very real sense, it is fundamentally changing the established rules of war. Not only the brutal war currently unfolding in Ukraine, but the fundamental rules of modern warfare in general, on a truly global scale.
The Ukrainian defense industry is no longer just surviving, it is developing. The defense sector has become systematic, technological, and large-scale. This means one thing: Ukraine enters any negotiations not empty-handed, but with weapons it is capable of producing itself. Shock? Russia is sliding back into the Middle Ages. The hunting season is gaining momentum. Conflicts between Russians and non-Russians are spilling over into mass raids on the streets, in markets, and at construction sites. Videos of harsh raids are flooding the internet. The Russian community is adding fuel to the fire. The powers of the so-called Russian world enthusiasts are growing. There are no punishments. Hatred is spreading. Chaos is intensifying. Here are the details. Once again, Russia is searching for enemies. This time, not somewhere far away, but right in the courtyards, at markets, and on construction sites. Migrants, non-Russians, and so on.
Wait, you keep filming. What kind of registration is this? Did he hit someone? He didn't do anything?
He absolutely did not do anything at all, whatsoever. Videos of raids and street altercations are appearing online, almost every day.
Things in Russia are getting worse and worse, which means someone needs to be blamed. The first to be blamed are, of course, Ukraine, Europe, NATO, and all the others who are supposedly attacking Russia. But we all know they all attacked Russia here, and now Russia is fighting them. But even that isn't enough. And so they have to find some more internal enemies. Of course, there are internal enemies, various liberal opposition members, foreign agents, and so on. But most of them have already left the country.
Civic activists play a special role in all of this. For example, the so-called Russian community. They call it restoring order.
The Russian community is just ordinary people. Just regular Russian folks, working people who have jobs during the day at factories or organizations, and in the evening or in their free time. They get together simply to help maintain law and order on the streets because there aren't enough police officers.
But more often than not, these kinds of raids really end up looking like a hunt for people who simply appear different from others and who also speak with a noticeable accent.
Recently, we published a video. A Russian nationalist is rude to a Muslim.
The slave, the Russian.
It seemed that this person was a member of the Russian community. But as soon as the community found out that their member was being sought, they immediately announced that now they were looking for the guy who tried to stand up for his brother.
The Russian community has put a bounty on me.
But in what possible way? Do these self-proclaimed vigilante enforcers actually possess such an immense amount of power and authority?
It's allowed for now. That is, once again, the authorities see this as a convenient method. A way to vent discontent, to let off steam, and so on and so forth.
But by the way, it doesn't really matter whether you're a newcomer from India or a local from Bashkiria, Chechnya, or Tatarstan. Everyone feels the pressure.
Now they're openly going after the Chechens. First there were raids, now there's fire. The Chechen Cuisine 95 cafe in Ramenskoye has been burned to the ground. The video shows the moment of the arson. The owners are speaking openly. They say this is the work of the Russian community, those who have long been putting pressure on Muslims.
You know, it's something subconscious, a fear of people, of others, of people who are different from them. But the thing is, we seem to be living in the 21st century, an enlightened age, and yet things are happening that should have ended, at the very least, in the 20th century, if not even earlier. What does that tell us? It tells us that today's Russia has slipped into a deep, I would even say partially medieval state.
And what's important is that rhetoric about migrants is coming not only from ordinary people, but also from deputies.
But the authorities have opened the doors for the replacement of the population. So that millions could come here, then more millions, and then these millions, as a result of being here, would multiply and reproduce, turning into tens of millions, and they would gradually occupy all the living space. As Senator Klisha said, not to live with us, but instead of us.
And here's the paradox. While they scare people with migrants on TV, the economy simply doesn't work without them.
There's work to be done, but there's no one to do it. Everyone's been killed in the war, so who's going to work? That's why, yes, of course, they bring in migrants. Sometimes one group, sometimes another. They used to bring in migrants from Central Asia. Now they'll be bringing them in from India. I think maybe it's because it's something new, something unusual.
Moreover, there will be even more migrants. After all, Russia has also agreed to bring in labor from Afghanistan. And what difference does it make whether Russians like it or not? Is it safe for the country? After all, it's simply profitable. And
neglecting all the rules, especially with regard to their own population, leads to the fact that, of course, no one is going to think about their own people, but the work needs to be done. So what can you do? That means they'll bring in those who are the cheapest for them. Not because it's good or bad, but because it will cost us the least. And of course, poor Afghanistan, where people really do live in extreme poverty, it's cheap to bring in workers from there. In
the end, Russia lives in a strange mode. They look for enemies abroad, but at the same time manage to stir up conflicts within the country as well. Everyone who doesn't fit the image of the proper Russian comes under attack. And it's not just migrants, but also the non-Russian peoples of Russia itself.
This is a careless attitude toward their own population, a disregard for the law and pitting people against each other. This will end very, very badly for the current authorities. But you know what is bad for the current authorities? Maybe that's actually good.
A super reform of the Ukrainian army. The newly appointed Defense Minister Fedorov is breaking all the molds. No one expected such a pace of innovation and cooperation. Ukraine and NATO have agreed on cooperation priorities, air defense, F-16s, HIMARS, and this is just the beginning. We'll tell you in this segment how the new minister has started to change the situation in the armed forces.
Ukraine's new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, has begun reforming the Ukrainian army by leaps and bounds, which has sent Putin's supporters into a frenzy.
He really is a competent organizer of drone production. And now he has set the goal of raising the losses of the Russian Federation's armed forces to 50,000 per month, thanks to drones. And in general, I believe this is a serious enemy, a serious challenge.
The first and main statement of the new minister is to increase Russian soldiers' losses to an irreversible 50,000.
To make the cost of war for Russia so high that it simply cannot bear it. To stop the enemy by force! Stop the enemy by force!
He presented the general tactical and strategic plan of the Ukrainian armed forces. The plan doesn't have any ambiguous arrows on the map, no wishful thinking, none of that general's verbosity. The new minister's plan fits into 5 words and 1 number. The plan is formulated as follows. The ultimate goal is to eliminate at least 50,000 Russian orcs during every single month of this conflict. It is concise, constructive, and very realistic.
War correspondents are whining that such a figure is quite realistic since Putin and his military leadership don't want to give up on the idea of meat grinder assaults.
Specifically, if we are talking about losses here, this desired target figure, it unfortunately can very well be achieved. Not long ago, Magyar reported that they calculated the number of destroyed targets, specifically personnel. That is, over 30,000 confirmed, which is basically the number of troops we receive in a month.
The second innovation from Fedorov is finally to disable the Russians' smuggled Starlinks and completely cut off their communications and drone control systems.
We need Starlink to work there because certain technologies are used that are important for us as well. They are connected to drones. There is another way to make sure our Starlinks work, and that the Starlinks that appear there by other means don't work. And so we are working with SpaceX to solve this issue.
Elon Musk himself supported the idea and said he would help in any way he could.
It seems that the steps we took to prevent the unauthorized use of Starlink by Russia have paid off. Let us know if additional measures are needed.
We've come up with an even simpler method. As far as I understand, Starlink satellites now, after some time, only those terminals that are on the so-called whitelist will be serviced in Ukraine. That is, units of the Ukrainian armed forces and ordinary Ukrainians who have these Starlinks need to add their terminals to the whitelist, register them there, and then continue using the internet as before. But the Russians won't be able to do this. They won't be able to add their smuggled terminals to this whitelist. And that is why their terminals will all soon turn into pumpkins, because
It's been less than a month since Fedorov was appointed Minister of Defense, and Russians are already in a real panic over the first new changes. What will happen next is anyone's guess, but it will be very interesting to watch.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukraine is dismantling Kremlin influence. Neighbors are freeing themselves from Russian shackles, the end of Lukashenko's dictatorship in Belarus, and the end of Russian occupation in Moldova's Transnistria. Ukraine is taking real steps to help neighboring countries rid themselves of the Russian world. And it's doing so quite successfully. Details to follow.
Lukashenko, the so-called president, is not recognized as legitimate by Ukraine or other EU countries. Today's Belarus has lost its sovereignty and has turned into a Russian governorate. The Lukashenko regime, and he personally, must be held accountable for their complicity in Russian aggression. Ukraine's position regarding its neighbors was voiced in a major interview with European Pravda by the head of the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha. We
believe that the time will come when Belarus, a democratic Belarus, will become the fourth member of the Lublin Triangle. I have now received instructions from the president to appoint a special representative, and in the near future I will submit a candidate for consideration. We are still deciding on the title for this position, but it will be an official who has the authority to engage with the democratic forces of Belarus.
Just the other day, during a visit to Lithuania, Volodymyr Zelensky's team made what was essentially a diplomatic move and for the first time publicly established contact with the so-called government. In exile, on camera, the Ukrainian president met with the head of the United Transitional Cabinet of Belarus, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. A third of the speech delivered by the Ukrainian president in Lithuania was devoted to Belarus. On Tsikhanouskaya's social media pages, the description of the meeting included not only praise for Zelensky, but also for Kirilo Budanov. This was in the context of the Ukrainian intelligence services assisting in the release of Belarusian political prisoners in mid-December 2025. The Ukrainian president invited Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya to Kyiv. When the visit will take place is still unknown.
This was a politically calculated move that needed to be heard. We are with you. Everyone who wants Belarus to be democratic and what the regime in Minsk needed to hear.
But it's not just about the meeting in Vilnius. Alarming signals to the regime in Minsk also came from the heart of Kyiv. On the 11th anniversary of the death of Belarusian Mikhail Zhizhnevsky, who was one of the first to die on the Maidan in 2014, a march of Belarusians took place in the center of the Ukrainian capital in memory of Mikhail and all compatriots who defended Ukraine's freedom from Russian occupiers.
I don't want to be here even once, nor to lesser heroes. Glory, glory, glory to Trocha.
In addition, the SBU announced the exposure of a KGB agent who had been recruited by Belarusian special services back in 2015. The woman worked at one of the TV channels of Putin's crony. In 2020, she was sent to Ukraine again, where she got a job at one of the national media outlets. The SBU published fragments of conversations between the detainee and her Belarusian handlers, as well as her attempts to recruit a member of the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
This isn't the KGB. This was a one-off operation. No one else in this life will touch me. Personally, that's good for me. No one will touch you. It's simply under the guarantee of everything possible. This is all my personal business and so on. No one will touch you. That's how it works.
With 10 years of experience, that should already be clear.
The SBU subtly hinted to Minsk that they were aware of the agent's trips to Europe and her assignments in Ukraine, and that the vast majority of her reports are fake.
Officers from the SBU and GUR began a prolonged operational game with the Belarusian agent, which allowed them to document her every move and, with her help, regularly misinform the Belarusian intelligence service.
The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, without going into detail, clarifies that they are now seeing new elements of support for Russian aggression in Belarus. Ukrainians are legally documenting every incident so that in the future they can raise the issue of imposing sanctions. Recently, the Ukrainian authorities have been speaking out more loudly not only about the future of Belarus but also of Moldova. The head of Ukrainian diplomacy, when asked whether Kyiv is considering providing military assistance to its neighbors for the deoccupation of Transnistria, emphasized that this remains the prerogative of Chisinau. But in both countries, it is becoming increasingly clear that Russian troops on this territory pose a threat to the national security of both Moldova and Ukraine.
A powerful strike against Russia is urgently needed. For the first time, Ukrainian-made ballistic missiles, the Sapsan OTRK, were used against Rostov. The missile is already on the production line. The world is in shock. This weapon surpasses all Western counterparts. There is panic in the Kremlin. Now, most of the swamps are within the sights of the Ukrainian super missile. We will tell you more about this in our report.
Information appeared online that the day before, the Ukrainian armed forces struck the chemical plant in Rostov with a Sapsan ballistic missile. Reports about the use of Sapsan missiles are not appearing for the first time.
Right now, at this very moment, according to official reports coming directly from the Russian side itself, there are at least 10 documented instances of this specific ballistic missile being deployed and utilized on Russian territory.
A year ago, President Zelensky announced that Ukraine had developed its own ballistic missile.
Yes, there was.
There was a successful test of the first Ukrainian ballistic missile, and I congratulate you on that, our defense industrial complex. I can't share any more details about this missile. And already this year, Sapsans will go into mass production.
According to information from open sources, it is reported that the production of these strike systems will be about 20 to 30 missiles per month, starting as early as 2026. According
to the stated specifications, the Sapsan missile is better than almost all known.
When we take a closer look at how these specific domestic models perform on the global stage, it becomes quite evident that they operate very differently than their various foreign counterparts do in similar international markets. The Ukrainian Sapsan has a range of 500.
In addition, the tactical and technical characteristics of the ballistic missiles are planned to be improved. I
believe that the absolute minimum is 500 kilometers, and then it could go up to 1,000, even 1,500. Let's put it this way. At the very least, we should be able to cover the European part of Russia with our ballistic missiles. And this missile has already come a long way, and it is almost at its logical conclusion. Right now, tests are underway, and we are waiting for the moment when we can start mass production.
The development of the missiles began even before Russia's full-scale invasion, but according to experts, the work was deliberately sabotaged.
It has better characteristics than the Iskander and is superior to the comparable Chinese system. Even back then, let's say 15 years ago, people were working on this. And not without reason. The Saudis bought the system and financed the project for some time. But there was a lot of resistance from the Russians and their agents here because they all understood what was at stake. At that time, we were not allowed to develop a range greater than 200 kilometers.
Analysts predict that thanks to these new missiles, the enemy's army will face major problems and new losses.
These are field depots for cluster munitions and locations where personnel are permanently or temporarily stationed. With the right intelligence, we can directly strike the launchers themselves. The Iskanders on the territory of the Russian Federation. This is the main advantage of these strike systems.
But of course, the most important advantage of the Sapsan missile is that it is entirely Ukrainian. Therefore, it does not require permission from Western partners to strike any targets on enemy territory.
A military alliance without the US, but with Ukraine. After Trump's ultimatums to NATO partners, Europeans began preparing for a new format of defending the continent against military threats. Ukraine finds itself at the center of security planning. The game for control over Europe's future peace.
This incredible journey is really just beginning for everyone involved in the process. One must truly wonder, can this newly formed and highly ambitious alliance radically and fundamentally transform the entire competitive landscape of the global industry as we know it today, or perhaps even beyond?
How will these efforts bolster the defenses of Kyiv? Let's keep watching closely to see how it all unfolds.
Tariffs against any country that tries to prevent him from seizing Greenland became the last straw for the EU's patience. This was reported by the American publication Politico.
But for many European governments, including America's oldest and most loyal allies, Trump's threat to impose punitive tariffs on anyone who tries to stop him from seizing Greenland was the last straw. They believe that now a breakup is inevitable. In frequent conversations, concerned European officials call Trump's successful decision to annex sovereign Danish territory madness and delusion. Politics.
It seems that Europe is ready to create a new alliance instead of NATO without the US, but with Ukraine. Ukraine could play a crucial role in this defense alliance due to the size of its territory, its geographical location, its defense industry, and the fact that it is already at war and has invaluable experience.
Ukraine will be key to Europe's defense, above all because of its technological base. In particular, its well-established production of top-class drones and the presence of the largest army in Europe. Juraj Maishin, military analyst.
For example, the United Kingdom, France, the Scandinavian countries, the Baltics, Poland, Germany, Italy. For most of Trump's second term, they worked within the framework of an effective group without America, the so-called coalition of the willing, and it could become the beginning of a defense union between Ukraine and Europe.
The coalition of the willing initially dealt with issues concerning Ukraine. It created very close ties between some key people in the capitals. They strengthened trust and the ability to cooperate. They know each other by name, it's easy for them to get in touch and send messages. If you factor in the military power of Ukraine, as well as the power of France, Germany, Poland, and the United Kingdom, the potential armed force of the coalition of the willing would be enormous and would include both nuclear and non-nuclear states. Politics.
Right now, Europe is buying all of Ukraine's weapons from the US, while Ukraine in turn has the largest combat-ready army in Europe. Therefore, a new military alliance without the US is quite possible, considering that the threat from Russia, even after a possible peace agreement, will not disappear.
Ukraine has friends who understand the nature of Russian aggression as a common problem. With them, we can try to create defensive alliances. On a tactical level, we can try to form regional unions. For example, the Baltic countries, Poland, other Central European states, and the United Kingdom. This will be a temporary and not very stable means of pursuing our strategic interests. But it is possible and necessary to look for options for other defense alliances. Anatoly Kruglashov, political scientist.
The issue of the need for EU defense without US support has been discussed for a long time. In recent days, many initiatives and bold headlines have been coming out of Brussels, and the coalition of those willing to stand with Ukraine could be the beginning of a new defensive alliance. Officially, the EU has decided to ensure its own self-defense by 2030, but in the context of war, this decision could be made much sooner.
That's all for now. For more breaking news, tune in to our next episode.